Yeah, thank you very much. That was wonderful. Troy, I do think you're back. Is that right?
Yes. Yes, I am.
There we go. Welcome back. So for our club secretaries report, we have Troy Szymanski, who's an investment counselor. So I will turn it over to Troy.
All right. Good early afternoon, everybody. Let's start with our guests. We'd like to welcome both Mike Deneen and Debbie Wilkins, who I've been informed have both submitted their applications. So we're looking forward to those getting through, but welcome to the meeting. Bill Bass is a guest of Rob Clinton. Andy McKean is a visiting Rotarian. Lana Friedman is a guest of Ted Friedman, and as well as Judson Walsh. I'd also like to welcome anybody else who we might have missed. Make sure to message Lauren if that's the case, and just want to say hey. Let's move on to announcements now. First and arguably most important, this is kind of one of my pet projects. So I hope to see you at tonight's virtual happy hour at 5:30. The Zoom link is provided in our meeting recap email today. Birthdays. We'd like to wish a happy birthday to John Wilson, Julie Freshman, and Brian. This week all have birthdays, so happy birthday to you guys. Save the date. Our online orders open tomorrow for our 17th annual peach sale, held on September 12th from 8 a.m. to noon. If you have questions or would like to join the peach team, please contact co-chairs Brian Juice and Kevin Chelity. Also, September 12th is the Humanity Bike Race fundraiser. Rotarians, friends, and family are all encouraged to participate. This event is inspired by the $17 million raised in 10 years by the Ride to End Polio. The funds raised will be split 2/3 to the Denver Rotary Club Foundation and 1/3 to the End Polio Now. To join the Club 31 Woohoo team by riding or supporting our riders, please contact Team Captain Carter Sales. Debbie, that should be it for me.
Thank you, Troy. Next, we have our good news bucket. So Carter, who is the president of the Denver Rotary Club Foundation, will be asking us for our good news. So be thinking about that. Oh, look at you, Carter.
Hello. Since I couldn't get my background on, I suited up. And this is for the Humanity Bike Challenge, okay? So we sent out a blast email this week. It's on the 12th. I'm the team captain. If you have any questions about it, let me know. We need bikes, people riding, and we need volunteers. So I'm going to kick off this week's Good News Red Bucket with a donation on behalf of the Denver Rotary Club team for the Humanity Challenge, okay? So what I'm going to do is I will turn this over to the rest of the people who have good news. And what I'd like you to do is just click on your participants icon at the bottom of the screen, and then you can raise your hand, and I'll scroll through the list, or you can raise your hand like Young is doing. And by the way, on your donation, after the meeting with the meeting recap, you can go on and make your donation. So Young Cho, hello. Can you, Lauren, can you unmute Young? Just a minute, Lauren.
Can you hear me?
You're now unmuted, Young. Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. I am announcing good news for golfer. From next year, Young Cho Golf Tournament, all free. From next year, I'm going to do, okay? So all golfers expect play golf next year with me, okay? Have a nice day.
Awesome, Young. Thank you. Let's see, let me scroll through here. Any raised hands? Mark. Hi, Mark.
Hi, everybody. Well, my good news is that about 10 days ago, our daughter got engaged to be married. And she'll be married end of August next year. up in northern Michigan, where I've been hanging out for the last couple of weeks, and that's the lake in the background. So it's been a nice spot to be. So that's the exciting news from our family.
Are you on Lake Michigan?
Crystal Lake, which is
Crystal.
Lake, Michigan.
That's near Traverse City?
Yes.
Awesome. Yeah, Harbor Springs is my stopping grounds. Great. Excellent. Congratulations. That's really good news.
Thank you.
So let's see, who else do we have? Let me scroll through here.
Ed Nanda has his hand raised.
Oh, Ned, okay. Ned?
Well, thank you. My good news is that today we have a person who has led an exemplary life, and with his own accomplishments, we can learn a lot. And what he has done in the world community, I think at the present time, each Rotarian should ask, and I am asking myself, what can I do to see that I can at least make a contribution toward what my friend has done for all these years. So welcome our wonderful speaker, Doug, today.
Thanks, Ned.
Andre Van Hall has his hand raised.
Andre, good. Thank you.
What I want to do is, in memory of the most magnificent Doug, tell him for 8 years of super service.
Oh my, yes. Absolutely. Wonderful, wonderful dog who I've gotten to know along with my rides with you, Andre, and blessings and prayers to you. And what a wonderful life you gave him, and what the contribution that he made to you is, it's just priceless. So it's all good. I'm actually tearing up. Thank you.
Thank you.
Who else do we have here? Lauren, do you see anybody else? I'm trying to scroll through here.
I do not.
Okay, and by the way, everybody, I forgot to mention that the first half of this year, the funds do go to the Denver Rotary Club Foundation, and then the second half of the year will go to the Rotary Foundation. So I guess if nobody else has anything, we'll conclude the Red Bucket, and thank you so much for your support and everybody for your news.
Very good, thank you. With that, I'm honored to welcome Seth to do our introduction, but before I turn the mic over, I will say, if you saw or heard my president's message, you know one of my comments was standing on the shoulders of giants of the past club presidents before me. So really, I'm so grateful to Doug for all that he has done for the club and for Project C.U.R.E. And with that, I will turn it over to Seth to introduce our speaker today.
Thanks, President Debbie. Given the comments made so far, Doug hardly needs much of an introduction, but I'll proceed anyway. I'm honored to introduce past Club 31 president for 2007-2008, Dr. Doug Jackson, who I had the pleasure of serving also as club treasurer. Since 1997, Doug has served as the president and CEO of Project C.U.R.E, which, as many of you know, was founded by Doug's father, Jim, in 1987 as a result of a side trip to a small medical clinic outside of Rio de Janeiro while on a consulting assignment in Brazil. Jim saw a community without effective health care, doctors without resources, and people without hope. Upon his return, Project C.U.R.E was born in his evergreen garage and has grown into the world's largest distributor of donated medical relief. Doug, Project C.U.R.E routinely provides over $50 million annually in donated medical equipment and supplies from 6 distribution centers in major U.S. cities and smaller collection centers around the country. It is consistently recognized with the highest rankings from GuideStar and Charity Navigator, and was named by Forbes as one of the top 20 most efficient large charities in America in 2011. Until a recent pivot to address the domestic needs of COVID-19, Project C.U.R.E delivered 3 to 5 semi-truck sized containers packed with medical equipment and supplies each week to over 135 countries around the globe. Funded by grants from the U.S. government, non-governmental organizations, and the generous support of philanthropic foundations, corporate partners, and individual donors from all walks of life, Project C.U.R.E is focused on prevention, diagnosis, and treatment of diseases such as HIV/AIDS, tuberculosis, malaria, and Ebola, the treatment of victims of earthquakes, floods, and other natural disasters, as well as responding to the medical needs of societal crises. COVID-19 checks at least two, perhaps all three of those boxes, it seems, and today Doug will explain Project C.U.R.E's pivot to address the related medical equipment and supply needs here in the U.S. Given the global nature of Project C.U.R.E's operations, Doug likely has more frequent flyer miles than most anyone you know, so hopefully this pivot has allowed him to stay closer to home. And it's also allowed him to be the best dressed participating in this meeting, although we don't know if he has pants on. Please help me welcome Dr. Doug Jackson back home to Club 31.
You're awesome. Thanks. Well, thanks everybody. It's great to be with you today, and just looking at the faces that I see on the screen. In 2007, 2008, if you remember, we used to open the meeting and just say, "Welcome to the greatest Rotary Club in the world," and I still believe that. And looking at all of you helps remind me of why this is such a great club. The things that we've done together, the stuff that has happened because of Denver 31. I live down at 27th and Blake, and in the afternoons after work, we like to take a bike ride, or we like to go on a little walk or something, just stretch the legs and get off of Zoom for a while. And every day when we do that, I pass that statue in front of Coors Field, and it's got a list of fantastic Rotarians that really have changed this world. And President Debbie, you talked about standing on the shoulders of giants. That's my story, and that's what this club means. And I see John Klug on here and the work that has happened all over Mexico. Ved, for you and Sid, the stuff that you've done in Russia with the law students and just represented this club. I mean, all of us sitting here today have a really proud heritage. And I just want to tell you thank you for allowing me to come back as a speaker. This is the first time I've been able to do a speech to a Rotary Club on Zoom. So congratulations to you all for pivoting as well. This was really cool. So anyway, great to be here. Great to see you. I wanted to tell you just a little bit about this COVID thing, because some of the funds that we used to do the work that we did around COVID came from this club. So this story today is your story as well. And I want to tell you about what happened. And then we're going to wrap up a little bit this afternoon with just 3 insights that I would want to share with you. So whether or not you're thinking about Project C.U.R.E, or you may be involved in something entirely different, I hope that there are some things that we can go home with today and think about some insights and some what we call lessons learned. So I'm going to try to do this here and do a little screen share and see how this works. All right, are we up? Good, 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 good. Well, I wanted to talk a little bit about Project Pivot, this one Rotarian's response to COVID-19, and kind of what we did and what happened there. Our usual challenge, I know that a lot of you are familiar with Project C.U.R.E, some of you may not be. This is kind of what our usual work looks like here. And the fact of the matter is that there's over 2 billion people around the world live on less than $2 a day. And this is a picture that I took of a lady. She was getting ready to have a baby. That, believe it or not, is a maternity clinic. There's a couple of things wrong. Remember those old pictures that they would have? It's like, what's wrong with this picture? And it was a little worksheet thing that we would do when we were kids. What's wrong with this picture? Well, there's no running water. All the windows are open. That's because there's no air conditioning. That table doesn't really adjust well. There's no incubators. There's nearly nothing there for the baby. There's not a whole lot there for the mom. That supply cart over there should be completely stocked with things like gauze and suture and gloves and things like that. In a situation like this, the problem is that mom would have had to have brought her own gloves, her own suture, her own gauze. If she didn't, there's a good chance that she would walk for could be a day in labor and the doctor wouldn't take care of her. And so that's usually what we're trying to do is to work on a situation like that and say, my dad was down doing economic consulting in Brazil and just happened to come across this little clinic. It was a house and there was really nothing in that clinic to take care of people, and it tore his heart out. And he came back and he started collecting stuff in his garage up there in Evergreen. And what has grown out of that then is this effort called Project C.U.R.E. And when I took over, we were doing about 12 containers a year, about one a month. This last year, we did about 200 40-foot containers. This picture here is in Ecuador. There's a whole community coming out to start to unload this container and take it into this hospital. The average value is right around $500,000 per container. And we've worked in 138 countries. So it's gotten to be kind of a big project. There's 7 Project C.U.R.E. locations across the United States, and these are these big 50,000 square foot warehouses. Of course, here's home, and it's always going to be home. Love Denver. Phoenix, Houston, Nashville, Chicago, Philadelphia. We just opened in Kansas City, and we're collecting out of a little place that Lamar Hunt owns called the Subtropolis. Our newest warehouse is actually underground, and we're shipping out of there. And then there's about a dozen little collection centers all over the United States. We collect and we take it into these facilities, we sort it out, process, and then we distribute out of these 7 facilities. So that's usually what we're doing. Then COVID happened. I don't know where you were on about the 10th or 15th of March. I was in Nashville, Tennessee. We had just done a big event. Seth is right. We've been traveling about 200 to 225,000 miles a year for the last several years. And we were doing a women's event because it was Women's Day. And I had a team of people that were in Ivory Coast. I had some people that were in Ghana, in Kenya. I was in Nashville. And I just decided, it's probably best we just head home and get everybody in one place and let's just weather this storm out for the next couple of weeks, right? And let's see what happens. And so we pulled everybody home. The woman that was working for me, she's the executive director in Phoenix. When she decided to go do the trip to Kenya and to Ghana, she said, "Hey, Doug, I've never been to France before. Would you mind if I just took a 3-day weekend and just looked around Paris?" And in January, it seemed like a good idea. Well, I'm watching her post her pictures on Facebook, and I texted her and I said, "Ruth, stop doing that because that's just kind of bad optics right now. Paris is a hotspot." And sure enough, by the time she got back home, she was COVID positive and spent the next 3 weeks at home trying to get through this. I got back to Denver and we started getting telephone calls. I got calls from the local hospitals here, from Denver Health, from Littleton. My brother is fire chief at West Metro, and he called and said, "Hey, dude, we can't get gloves and masks for the firefighters." And within about 24 hours, the entire world changed for us. We started getting telephone calls from people that are our volunteers, nurses, saying, "We can't get personal protective equipment in our own hospitals." And so some of these nurses were taking black plastic trash bags and they were cutting a little slit in the top of it so they could get it over their head and put armholes in the side, and that's what they were using as gowns. There was not enough masks. I mean, we all saw the whole thing with the N95 masks and the KN95s. Here's the irony. In December and January, Project C.U.R.E. shipped about 250,000 N95s to China to give to the Chinese because we thought that we could get this COVID thing stopped when it was on the other side of the ocean. Then all of a sudden we didn't have enough here. So we went through the warehouse. This is what the warehouse in Denver looks like. This is just right over my shoulder. And we started pulling off pallets of all the gloves that we could find. We started pulling off pallets of gowns, of surgical booties and hats and face shields and everything that would be PPE related, personal protective equipment. We were scrounging around for hand sanitizer, for cleaning solution for the floors, just anything we possibly could find to take back to the hospitals. Ironically, some of this stuff had just come from some of those hospitals, and we just turned it right back around on the truck and sent it back. That doesn't sound like a really big deal maybe, but here was the trick. When Project C.U.R.E works with a lot of these organizations, hospitals, manufacturers, we actually sign an agreement that the things that we are given from the manufacturer, from the hospital, will not be redistributed in the United States. And the reason is because there's a lot of legal liability that attaches to some of this stuff. Some of these manufacturers don't want the used stuff going back in and ruining their market, just to be frank. And there's some other issues too. So for us to pivot and start donating back to the United States was a huge, huge, huge decision. The trick was we didn't have a lot of time to do that. We didn't have time to impanel a big board. We didn't have time to call all of our friends, the donors. We just had to make a very risky decision that we needed to start helping the people here in the United States. And that's exactly what we did. When we got rid of all of the stuff in the warehouses, we realized that there was still more demand. This thing wasn't going to be over in 2 weeks. And we didn't know where the bottom of the pool was. And so I got together with Mike Kopp and some of the Colorado legislators after a Colorado Concern meeting on a Friday afternoon. And we said, hey, what could we do? And so between Friday at about 12 o'clock, we got a hold of the Denver Broncos and said, hey, could we use the Mile High Stadium as a staging ground? And we had some of the Colorado State legislators come down and work with us. And we collected another over 30 pallets of personal protective equipment. So, well, where did that come from? Well, Metropolitan State University, for example, is a great example. They had labs that they taught, right? And the labs, everybody has to be in gloves. Well, they had all these gloves, and the professor comes over with this little SUV full of gloves, and she says, we're not going to be using these anytime soon, so why don't you take them and give them to healthcare workers? There were people that were in the auto body business or people that were in the construction industry. Interestingly, the non-medical use of N95 masks is about 85% of total production. So 15% of the masks that are made in the world are used in medical. The rest of them are used in places like construction companies and auto body shops and rendering plants and labs and all of that kind of thing. People just came out of the woodwork. And there was one interesting car that drove up. And you remember, I mean, we didn't really know what COVID was all about at the time. We didn't have any idea. We just knew that if you were elderly, if you were sick, that you were at risk. This car drove up at Denver Broncos Stadium. It was cold back then, if you remember, in March. And there was a man and a woman that were probably, I'm going to guess, in their 70s or 80s. And they had their masks on. And they came and they gave about 6 bottles of, the Santa Wipe, hand sanitizer things. And that was their contribution. And they said, make sure that you get this to frontline responders. We just want to help. And I thought about the story of the widow's mite, right? And the last little bit that they had to give, that was the kind of outpouring that this community created for the doctors and the nurses and the frontline responders, the fire departments and things like that. Well, that gave us a little bit of courage. And so the next weekend we went and tried it again. And we went down to Colorado Springs and we partnered with the University of Colorado and the Rocky Mountain Vibes. And we did another collection drive and we collected a whole bunch more. Well, that worked great. So we decided, hey, let's see if we can try this in Chicago. And so we partnered with the United Center and the Chicago Bulls and the Blackhawks, and some of the White Sox showed up, and we collected another 13 pallets of personal protective equipment. We were on a roll. We did it in Nashville, and we did it with the Tennessee Titans, and we collected a whole bunch more in Nashville. We would have groups come and sort all of this stuff out and put all of the gloves together in the boxes, and we would put it in our trucks, and we would turn the trucks back around, and we would take it and put it back in the hospitals and give it to the nurses. The mayor in Houston came out and with the Astros, we collected another 12 pallets. And we did the same thing a few days later, collected 7 more. So we collected 19 total. A pallet, by the way, is usually in our world is worth about $10,000 to $15,000. And we just kept collecting and collecting. We did the same thing in Phoenix with the Arizona Cardinals. We got a call about halfway through, and the call was from our friends over here at Anschutz, and they said, we're short of ventilators. And so we had some people come into the warehouse, and they started working on the ventilators that we had, and we put about a dozen ventilators back into University of Colorado Hospital at Anschutz. We got an interesting call from Rangeley, Colorado, and they had a ventilator at that hospital, and the ventilator had failed, and they had a COVID case. And so there's a group here called Angels Flight. This is different than the Angels Flight pants that we used to wear back in the 1980s, but this is a group of people that own aircraft, and they donate their aircraft to do humanitarian work. And we started working with Angels Flight in the rural areas, rural hospitals. They came and they got this ventilator, and this is a picture of this ventilator here. They came and got this and put this in the back of that tiny little Beechcraft, and we flew that out to Rangeley and got it set up, got that patient put on that ventilator, and saved that person's life because of this group of people that were able to fly this out. One of the coolest things was to walk into these hospitals where these nurses and doctors were working, and it was absolutely amazing. They would show up, and a lot of these people didn't go home. Some of the people still are not going home. They're living in a hotel because they're around COVID and they don't want to get their family sick, and so they're staying away. It's kind of a lonely life in some cases. It's pretty high stress, and for them to have a group of people show up, the volunteers at Project C.U.R.E, and bringing PPE to them, the things that they know that they needed to stay safe, and to have them understand that that was given from this community, from the Denver Rotary Club, from the volunteers, the elderly man and woman in the car that delivered the bottles of hand sanitizer. It meant so much to these folks, and it was really a source of encouragement. We did the same thing in Westchester County in Philadelphia. We got a big warehouse out there, and we started going out to the fire departments, and they started helping us deliver back into the hospitals because they had access and they had vehicles. And the logistics of just putting this whole thing together and then getting it turned back around to the people who were really on the front lines was absolutely incredible. We delivered nearly 9,000 cases of PPE back into the frontline workers. That's probably somewhere between $3 to $5 million. We're still trying to tally up the number, but to put that into a perspective of the size, just to get your head around what that looks like, that's 10 semi-truck trailers full of stuff that went right back into the hospitals across the United States. And here's the deal, we're still working on it. If you watch what's going on in the United States in healthcare, they think that we've lost somewhere in the neighborhood of $31 billion in the healthcare industry in the United States since this COVID thing has started. $31 billion. I mean, that's a huge, huge amount of money that will never be reclaimed. The reason is because when the COVID thing started, of course, they stopped doing elective procedures. And the elective procedures are the procedures where hospitals in the United States make their money. Sometimes you think elective procedures, well, is that a nose job? It's not. It's like hernia surgery, back surgery, hips, knees, all of those kind of things. And there's a lot of people right now, I can tell you that across the United States, people are not doing prostate biopsies in many, many places because you have to have an emergency room available if you do a prostate biopsy. And the emergency room is reserved for COVID cases. So it's hit the United States incredibly hard in a lot of ways that we never expected when we started off on this little adventure called COVID-19. If you're a rural hospital, like out in Rangeley, Colorado, we're doing a lot of work in Kansas, we're doing a lot of work in Nebraska, Wyoming, places like that. Those are the hospitals right now that are at most risk. And that's a big concern and something we need to think about because a lot of those hospitals are not tied into the big chains like the HCAs and the Centuras and places like that. They're on their own. And so when they don't have the elective procedures and they don't have the revenue, we are standing a pretty high likelihood that a lot of those hospitals are going to go bankrupt still and leave those communities without health care. So what Project C.U.R.E is doing is we have started to pivot back, and I'm going to talk about that in just a second here. But we're trying to basically ride two horses at the same time. We're still working in these communities where you're seeing the spikes. Like you know that we have warehouses in Phoenix and in Houston, and they're turning around asking for stuff. The craziest thing was within about 48 hours, the hospitals like here in Denver just said, thanks, we're good. The supply chain caught up. We didn't have as many people come to the hospital as what we thought. The people who did come to the hospital didn't need ventilation. They weren't as sick as we thought. So we're okay, we're well taken care of. That's never happened with the rural hospitals yet. And now when we see a respike, that's what's happening here. So we're still trying to do that. But at the same time, all of our friends all over the world are calling and saying, hey, this thing is out of control in Honduras. We don't know what to do with COVID in Mexico. We're having a real struggle with COVID in Nigeria right now. Kenya, bad situation. I mean, there's just all kinds of places around the world that are really, really hurting, and they really, really need the help. And so what Project C.U.R.E is trying to do now, like I said, is really try to ride two horses at the same time. And I'll tell you just kind of what one of those things looks like. This is kind of an exciting project. And again, I tell you this because this is part of what this club is involved in. Stryker came out and made a hospital bed, COVID bed. It's 11.5 inches high. It's not electric. It doesn't have side rails. It has a post to put an IV on. The back does recline, so you can use this with a ventilator. They made 25,000 beds in anticipation that we would be putting hospital beds into places like the convention center. Well, that didn't happen. And so we've been blessed with 22,500. They kept 2,500 of them, 22,500 beds. So right now we're going like a house of fire, shipping beds all over the world to try to make sure that the people in the places where the COVID is really starting to spike now have the equipment, not only the PPE, but they've got the beds to put people on, and they can take care of the folks that really need it the most. So that's a little bit about what's going on. I wanted to share just a couple of lessons learned, and then we'll do some question and answer if you'd like to. In working with medical facilities all over the United States since the 15th of March, these are doctor's offices, practices, hospitals, things like this. One of the things that has really made a difference as far as the leadership of these organizations is what I call clarity and courage. And I want to share this with you because even if public health is not your thing, I hope that there's maybe some insights on things that we can talk about today that would be helpful to you as you're kind of working your way through this whole COVID thing. Clarity and courage. This whole COVID thing really forced us to make some decisions that we probably already knew we needed to make. I was on a call with some CEOs yesterday, and one of the guys was reflecting, and he said, you know, I've got some clients that they really weren't the greatest clients. But before COVID, I kept them because it just seemed like, you know, maybe we could just bring them around. He said, what COVID forced us to do is make the hard decision and say, it's time we move on. That's happening all over. One of the things that this did was it just brought this huge magnifying glass, not only to the problems that we were having within the healthcare industry in the United States. I mean, you think about this for a minute. Why is it that we are so addicted to disposable everything? We use gowns once, we throw them away. We use a mask once, we throw it away. Why? It doesn't have to be that way. Why is it that all of the stuff that we really need gets made literally a half a world away? This is without an embargo. This is without, you know, a little dispute with China. That's a long ways to get stuff all the way around to the other side of the world when we need it now. So there were some weaknesses that this exposed, and I hope one of the things that comes out of this is some courage to have a discussion around the things that we probably already knew. There's a guy that wrote a book called the Black Swan. He also wrote a compendium to that called Anti-Fragile. And one of the things he talked about was, he said, this is not a Black Swan event. For the last 15 years, Hollywood has done a movie about a pandemic at least once or twice every year for 15 years. We knew it was coming. We should have been ready for it. And he's probably right. So there's some courage around this coming out of this that we need to have some conversations, right? One of the other interesting things that we knew that we could be doing that I'm watching happen, and this is sort of the good thing, is telemedicine, telehealth. We've known for 20 years that there would be an opportunity for us to have a meeting with our doctor, just like what we're doing here today at this Rotary Club, but we just never really embraced it. And all of a sudden, everybody's saying, hey, wait, this is the coolest idea. I can actually see my doctor without having to get in the car and drive over and see my doctor, right? But it's taken some courage, and there's a lot of organizations, there's a lot of companies right now that are having to take that step and say, you know what, I think what we really want to do is the right thing. I think it's going to take some courage to take a step forward and to do the stuff that we thought we were going to do anyway. All right. Let me see if I can get this back to. So clarity and courage. This forced us to make the hard decisions, and that's probably not a bad thing coming out of COVID. The second thing I would share with you, just kind of a takeaway, is competition and collaboration. And I call this rules, what rules? Talking to some people the other day, I've got a friend that owns a company, and what he does is he does billing and collections for hospital systems, right? So when somebody doesn't pay their bill, he's the guy that gets charged with calling people up and bothering them until they pay their bill. Guess who his competitor is now? Is a bank, because the doctors are saying, hey, listen, I've got this loan program, so I get paid up front today, and then you can pay this loan back at 25% interest over the next 6 months. Well, he's starting to have to collaborate. There's going to be a lot of things that come out of this COVID that we didn't really think about, but it's going to be an opportunity. We're going to get competition from places that we never thought of. I mean, who would have thought if you were Kroger, King Soopers, that your greatest competition was going to become Amazon? But that's exactly where we are. It's also an opportunity for us to collaborate with people that we never thought we could. And it opens up some huge opportunities. I never thought that we would be collaborating with rural healthcare all over the United States. We are. I never thought that we would be doing the stuff that we're doing with Stryker, but we are. We had an interesting call. There's a guy named Elvis Duran, and Elvis Duran is a disc jockey and has a syndicated show all over the United States. And he called up and he said, hey, we want to do a stay-at-home ball. We're going to get all of these artists like Jewel and Train and everybody else, and they're going to play from their bedrooms. They're going to play from their home at night. And we want to do this to raise money for Project C.U.R.E. You talk about a collaboration that just came right from out of the blue. Rob Corddry, the comedian, did the same thing. He did the Funny You Should Mask event, and he had a couple of comedians interview a couple of doctors about what it was like to be on the front lines of the fight against COVID, and they put that up, and Project C.U.R.E. was a part of that with WebMD. That was one of the most fun opportunities that we had to collaborate in arenas that we never thought was going to happen. So coming out of COVID, we've got a couple of opportunities, and we got a couple of, if you wanted to call them, threats, right? We're going to have some competition from places we never thought we were going to have it. We're going to have some collaboration in arenas that we probably have not even imagined yet. Where we end up with that really is up to us and what we want to do to take a look at it. And then I want to leave you with just one third thought here. And this notion of consistency in communication. In my opinion, the real COVID victim in our society is trust. And what I mean by that is, I just talked to a guy this morning, and he said, the biggest problem is, he said, I just had a grandson, and my son won't let me come over to see my grandson because we've been up here in Summit County and we're not sure that we're safe. it used to be that we kind of thought we knew sort of what the enemy looked like. And now the enemy is us. If you don't believe me, walk into a grocery store and take your mask off and watch what happens. We've got neighbors that don't want to talk to neighbors. We got people at work that show up and it's like, well, you guys all went camping last weekend and we're not really sure that we want you coming back to the office today. And there's an element really where the fabric of our society, whether it's in our hospitals, whether it's in our grocery stores, whether it's in our businesses, is really being stretched, even with our families, because we're not sure that we can be safe. I can tell you that my team started looking at me saying, well, Doug, there's organizations that are laying off 30, 40, 50% of their people. A lot of nonprofits aren't even going to make it through this COVID crisis. What about our jobs? Do we really trust you as a CEO, as the leader? And so the thing that I would share with you just kind of in conclusion is this challenge for us to be really, really consistent, to over communicate. A couple of years ago, I had an opportunity to get on an airplane and I traveled across the United States with a guy named General Chuck Jacoby. General Jacoby was the 4-star general that was in charge of NORTHCOM NORAD down in Colorado Springs. And we were doing some work. And so I ended up, like I said, having the privilege of traveling with him. And we would get off the plane and we would go see these naval airmen at North Island Naval Base in San Diego, or we'd go up to Canada and we spent some time up there with some of the NORTHCOM people up there. And I watched the general and what he would do with these young soldiers, these sailors and these Marines, and he would walk over and he would talk to them about the vision. And I just said, how often do you have to communicate this? And he said, I say the same thing over and over and over again until I'm completely tired of saying it. And he said, that's the day that I know that I'm just starting to communicate. And so in this whole process, that's what we've tried to do. And we've tried to over communicate with our volunteers. We've tried to over communicate with our hospital donors. We've tried to over communicate with our staff. And it's tiring and it's something that takes a lot of time. We used to get everybody together just twice a year. And I mean, I'm talking about everybody all the way across the United States. We would bring everybody to Denver in June and then again in November. When COVID started, I started on Friday afternoon and we started doing a Zoom call with everybody in the entire organization, all on at the same time. And the first thing that I did on a Friday afternoon was to say, I just want to tell you we had a good week and Monday you have a job. And so show up Monday getting ready to play again because this is what we're going to do. And that over communication and that consistency in the messaging is probably one of the most important things we can do for our organizations, for our teams, for our families, for everybody. Because when we are in a situation where we don't really have trust like we need to, when we're in a situation where we got something like COVID that's tearing at the fabric, at the ligaments of our society, we really have to overcompensate with that. We have to be unbelievably consistent. And we've got to communicate over and over and over again. So the thought is that if we can see things clearly, if we can take advantage of the opportunities to collaborate, and then we can communicate and do it in a consistent manner, there's some really good things that are going to come out of this COVID experience. And I think they're going to help us to take that next step forward. So anyway, I just want to tell you thank you for allowing me to be a part of this, this fantastic, the best Rotary Club in the world. Love you guys. Really love the opportunity to be a part of this. Thanks for your support for Project C.U.R.E, for coming out and being a part of SORT teams and everything else. God bless you.
So Doug, thank you so very much. Just personally learned so much, and I've even been to the warehouse multiple times. We have a time for just a couple questions, and I've got one that's queued up already. If people have a couple questions, we send them directly to me and I'll facilitate. So the first question comes from Seth. Ask Doug if Project C.U.R.E has pivoted entirely to COVID-19 related needs, or if some efforts are still focused on broader medical relief needs across the world.
That's a great question, Seth. We're still trying to address issues like, maternal mortality. We've done a lot of work around saving mothers, giving life, and helping babies breathe and training on essential care for every mother. You know, during all of this stuff, the fact of the matter is there are still little kids falling off the back of their dad's motorcycle in Vietnam. It happens. There's moms having babies in places like in Congo. You know, there still is an Ebola outbreak on the border of Congo and Rwanda. Just a lot of stuff going on. And so those are those two horses. We're still trying to take care of those people and then address this whole thing about COVID as well.
One other question we've got from Julie Freshman. Incredible information, Doug. What do you see or forecast with supply chain, restocking, and global shipping?
Well, I think that's where I think, you know, if I was a younger man and could get started again, I think I would want to jump right in there, because I think there's still some really broken pieces to this. I kept saying, why is it that we can't take a cloth and weave into that cloth colloidal silver and copper and make masks out of it that can be reused? Well, guess what? I just got an offer the other day from a company in Vietnam that's taken cloth and they've woven colloidal silver and copper into this thing, and you can reuse this mask. There's opportunity here. Anytime something is this badly broken, count on the fact that there is an opportunity to fix it. And I see that our supply chain it's got some weak points to it. When we have to fly things in on 747s in the middle of the night from halfway across the world, there's a problem there, and there's going to be some pretty smart entrepreneurs in this country that are going to start figuring that out. I'm too old to be on the front end of that one, but gosh, I hope there's a young kid that can figure this one out.
All right, well, thank you so much. On behalf of you speaking with us today, you'll really appreciate this. We are giving a gift to Polio Plus. The Rotary Club of Denver made a donation to Rotary International Polio Plus, which will fund 33 children to be inoculated. That's matched by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, 2-to-1. So in total, 100 children will be inoculated.
Amazing.
Pretty exciting news, because Rotary International tries to make or gather donations in 50 million, and then they get the match from Bill and Melinda. And it was really close last year, but we did it. And so very much happy to have you here.
Thank you.
Lots of thank yous in the chat. I hope you can see all them and all the incredible things that you've done. And with that, I am going to tell you about next week's meeting. It is also online. The fellowship begins at 11:45. From noon to 1, we'll be meeting, and the topic will be leveraging proven solutions for large-scale poverty alleviation, with Richard Lackey as our speaker. So with that, you're all on mute, and join me though in the 4-way test. Lauren got booted off of her computer, so we normally show the slide, but you'll get to follow me instead. So follow along. Of all the things we think, say, or do, is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? And with that, I'll ring my official bell. And we are adjourned. Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Doug, very much.